Welcome to Sandomy.
It's really good to be back for this session.
So, uh, we've reached a pretty critical point in this
We
series.
have, yeah.
Over the last few days, we've mapped out the whole landscape of the empty homes crisis
Mm.
for you. We've looked at the sheer scale of the numbers. We've unpacked those incredible regeneration success stories coming out of Kent. And yesterday, we went deep on the climate angle.
Right, the retrofitting.
Exactly. Why retrofitting these old shells is actually a massive green opportunity.
Yeah, we've covered the what and the why. We've looked at the high-level strategy. But today, I think we need to make a very specific pivot.
Okay.
We need to move from strategy to delivery.
Right. Because having a strategy document sitting on a shelf is great, and having the data is essential. But good intentions alone do not actually bring a single empty home back into use.
No, they don't.
You can't live in a spreadsheet.
Exactly. I mean, you can have the most robust housing strategy in the country, but if you don't have the mechanisms to deliver it, the actual tools in the box, those properties stay empty.
Yeah.
So today is really about that toolkit. It's about the practical reality of how local authority professionals actually get this done. It's about incentives, it's about support, and then, when those don't work, it's about enforcement.
So let's establish the mission for this discussion. We are looking at the mechanics of how we move from that initial identification of a problem to the final resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to do that, we first have to remind ourselves, and you listening,
Yeah.
why this intervention is actually necessary. Why can't we just leave the market to sort itself out?
Well, the figures we've been looking at this week really answer that question for us.
They do.
We're currently looking at over 300,000 long-term empty homes across England, and that is the highest level we've seen in over a decade.
And long-term here usually means empty for more than 6 months, right?
That's right, over 6 months. And the rate of increase is what is particularly concerning to professionals in the sector. We saw a 14% increase in just 1 year. Yeah, that is a significant spike. If you just leave the market to its own devices, a purely laissez-faire approach, the trend suggests that number just keeps going up, not down. The market isn't correcting itself. In many ways, the inertia is actually compounding the error.
And we have to juxtapose that statistic with the other side of the housing ledger. This is what really creates the pressure, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because while we have 300,000 homes sitting empty, often just deteriorating, we have 131,000 households living in temporary accommodation.
That is the crucial context. When you put those two numbers side by side, the professional and moral obligation becomes very clear. This is the key insight for today. Leaving a property empty for years is not a neutral choice.
Okay, say more about that. What do you mean by it not being a neutral choice?
Well,
Because I think many owners might feel that if they aren't actively doing anything with the property, they aren't actively doing any harm. It's just sitting there.
and that is the fallacy. Entropy is active. An empty home has active consequences. It has consequences for the immediate neighbors who have to deal with potential blight, damp spreading through party walls, vermin, or just the visual decline of their street, which knocks value off their own home.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has consequences for the council, which loses revenue and gains an administrative burden. And most importantly, it has consequences for those families in need who are locked out of potential housing.
So the local authority has a duty to...
To act. Precisely. It can't just be a passive observer of this data. The duty is to intervene. But, and this is the core of today's discussion, the nature of that intervention matters enormously.
Yes.
You don't just go in with a sledgehammer on day one. You don't start a negotiation with a lawsuit.
Right. And this brings us to the first phase of the toolkit, which is engagement, the carrot approach, if you like. I think there's a public misconception sometimes that every empty homeowner is a speculator sitting on an asset waiting for the price to go up, or someone who just doesn't care about the neighborhood.
And that is rarely the reality. In my experience, and looking at the casework from places like Kent, most empty homes are not cases of willful neglect. They are usually symptoms of a crisis in the owner's life.
So what are the common scenarios you see? What does that crisis actually look like on the ground?
It's often probate delays, families arguing over an inheritance, or just struggling with the complex legal process. You have a house that's stuck in legal limbo for years while siblings fight.
Yeah, I've heard that happening quite a bit.
Or perhaps an owner has had to go into residential care, and the family is overwhelmed with the care costs and the sheer logistics of moving a parent.
I can completely see how the property would just fall to the bottom of the priority list in that situation.
Exactly. Financial difficulties are another huge factor. Someone buys a property to do it up, runs out of money, and get stuck with a half-finished shell. They can't rent it out because it's not safe, and they can't sell it easily because it's a wreck.
Or sometimes it's simply a lack of confidence, right? They know the property needs work. They just don't know where to start, so they do nothing.
It's paralysis. That is the word I use most often. Paralysis. So the first step for any empty homes officer is not to threaten, but to contact, advise, and support. It's about unblocking that paralysis.
So let's look at the menu of support that a proactive counsel can offer. Because it's quite extensive, isn't it? It's not just a friendly phone call saying, please fix your house.
No, it has to be practical tools designed to remove specific barriers. It's access to renovation loans. That is often the biggest hurdle, just getting the capital to make the place habitable.
Right.
It's advice on letting schemes, helping owners navigate the rental market if they're nervous about being landlords. It involves connections to housing associations who might lease the property from them, effectively taking the management headache away.
And what about for those who just want out? The ones who say, look, I can't handle this property anymore. I just want to sell.
For them, it can be things like reduced auction fees. If they decide to sell, the council can help facilitate that to ensure it goes to someone who will actually use it. We also see information on VAT relief being a big help.
Hold on, let's define that for the listener. Why does VAT relief matter here?
Well, renovating a long-term empty home often attracts a lower VAT rate, sometimes 5% or even 0%, depending on how long it's been empty, compared to the standard 20% on typical building work.
Oh, wow.
But many owners simply don't know that concession exists. That 15% difference can be the margin that makes a renovation project financially viable. And of course, now more than ever, connecting them to retrofit grants for energy efficiency is a key part of that support conversation.
We have to mention the Kent example here again because their no-use empty loan model really illustrates why this specific type of financial support is needed. Why can't these owners just go to a high street bank?
That's the catch-22 of the empty home. The genius of the no-use empty model is that it provides short-term secured loans to renovate these properties. These are often properties that high street banks simply will not touch.
Because of the condition.
Exactly. If a house has no kitchen or bathroom, or if it's structurally unsound, a standard mortgage lender won't lend on it. The owner is trapped. They can't get money to fix it because it's broken, and it's broken because they don't have money.
So the council steps in as the lender of last resort.
Essentially, yes. The council steps in, provides the loan, the work gets done, the value of the property goes up, and the loan is repaid when the property is sold or rented. It effectively de-risks the renovation for everyone involved.
And the key principle here is that the goal is to remove barriers to action. You clear the path so the owner can walk down it. That is the engagement phase.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the ideal scenario. You offer the carrot, the owner takes it, the home comes back into use, everyone wins.
Yeah.
But let's be real, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, despite all the offers of help, nothing happens. The owner ghosts you. The property just sits there.
And that is where we have to pivot. When engagement doesn't work, the toolkit has to expand. We move from support to leverage.
And the primary financial lever here is the council tax premium. This has become a really standard tool for local authorities now.
It has. It's about changing the economics of leaving a property vacant. If you leave a property empty long-term, it shouldn't just cost you the standard rate. It should cost you more because you are using up a finite social resource.
Can you walk us through the escalation structure? Because it really ramps up over time, doesn't it? It's not just a small administrative fee.
It does. In many areas, including across Kent, the structure is quite steep. Typically, after a property has been empty for 1 year, you are looking at a 100% premium. That means you are paying double your council tax.
Double the tax after just 1 year. That is already a significant jump.
Then, if it stays empty for 5 years, that premium hits 200%. You are paying triple the standard rate.
Right.
And if you let it drift to 10 years, that's a 300% premium. You are paying 4 times the normal council tax bill every single year.
That is a massive amount of money. If your base tax is £2,000, you could be paying £8,000 a year just to keep the house empty.
Exactly. And it forces a decision. For an owner who is perhaps just sitting on a property or delaying a decision, getting a bill that is 3 or 4 times higher than their neighbor's bill focuses the mind.
I bet.
It forces them to ask, is it worth keeping this empty, or should I fix it? Or should I sell it?
It essentially monetizes the inertia.
That's a great way to put it. It monetizes the inertia. And the message it sends is crucial. Housing is a finite resource. We cannot afford to waste it. If you choose to waste it, there's a cost attached to that choice.
Okay, so We've tried the carrot, the support and loans. We've applied the financial pressure, the tax premiums. But there are still cases where a property remains empty, perhaps deteriorating, perhaps causing a serious nuisance to the neighborhood.
Yes.
The owner is wealthy enough to pay the premium or stubborn enough to ignore it. This is where we have to open the heavy drawer of the toolkit.
The formal enforcement powers, the stick approach.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is an escalation. We aren't doing this lightly or punitively.
Absolutely. This is for when statutory action is required to protect the community. And there is a specific toolkit of powers available to councils under housing and planning legislation.
Let's list them out, because I think people often hear about enforcement but don't know what it technically means. It sounds a bit abstract. What are the specific tools?
There are a few key ones. First, you have improvement notices. These are served under housing legislation. This legally forces the owner to carry out specific repairs to make the property safe. If they don't do it, the council can prosecute.
Okay, so that's a direct legal order. Fix the roof or else.
Essentially. Then you have works in default. This is where the council says, okay, you haven't fixed the dangerous wall, so we are going to send in our contractors to fix it, and we are going to send you the bill. This is often used to make a property safe or tidy.
And if they don't pay the bill?
It puts a charge on the property. The council gets their money eventually when the house is sold. And then you have community protection notices. These are used specifically to stop the blight like rubbish piles or overgrown gardens from affecting the neighborhood.
So those tackle the condition of the property. But what about the ownership or control? What if the owner is just absent? What about the heavy hitters?
This is where we get into the most powerful interventions. First, you have empty dwelling management orders, or EDMOs.
Unpack that for us. What does an EDMO actually allow a council to do? Because it sounds like you're seizing the house.
Not quite seizing ownership, but seizing control. An EDMO allows a council, if they get approval from a tribunal, to actually take over the management of property. If a home has been empty for over 2 years and is causing a nuisance, the council can step in, take the keys, renovate it using public funds, and rent it out to a tenant.
So the owner still owns the bricks and mortar.
Yes, but they lose the right to say who lives there or how it's managed. The council collects the rent. They use that rental income to pay back the renovation costs and management fees. Once the costs are recovered, the surplus might go to the owner, but the council is in the driver's seat.
So the owner effectively loses control of their asset for a period of time.
Yes, typically up to 7 years. It's a very strong intervention. It effectively says, if you won't be a landlord, we will do it for you. But there is one that goes even further.
The CPO.
The compulsory purchase order. This is the ultimate power. It is the ability for the local authority to acquire the property outright without the owner's consent when all other options have failed.
That sounds drastic. I imagine that's a legal minefield.
It is drastic. It is the nuclear option. And we have to be clear about the context of using these heavy hitters like EDMOs and CPOs. They are incredibly resource intensive.
I can imagine.
They take a lot of legal work, public inquiries, a lot of time, often years, and they require very strong evidence that the council has tried absolutely everything else. Councils do not use these lightly.
But presumably, having them in the back pocket changes the conversation.
That is the key point. You might only carry out 1 or 2 CPOs a year, maybe none. But the fact that you can do it and the fact that you will do it, if pushed, strengthens the credibility of all those earlier engagement attempts.
Yeah.
When an empty homes officer says, we really want to help you fix this, but we will take action if we have to, the owner knows it's not an empty threat.
It's about credibility. If the stick is made of rubber, nobody respects it.
Entirely. If the toolkit stops at polite letters, the difficult cases never get solved. The heavy enforcement powers are the backstop that makes the voluntary engagement work.
This brings us to a really interesting philosophical point about this work. We're talking about taking people's property or taxing them heavily or forcing entry to fix a roof. How do professionals balance that?
Yeah.
How do you maintain proportionality in a democratic society?
It is the central challenge of the job. Effective empty homes work sits right at the intersection of private property rights and public interest. You are balancing the rights of the owner to do what they want with their asset against the rights of the community to live in a safe, thriving neighborhood.
And there's a mantra for this, isn't there?
There is. Encouragement where possible. Enforcement where necessary.
I like that.
You always want to be on the side of encouragement. You want to be the partner. But you have to be willing to be the enforcer when the partnership is rejected.
I think framing matters here. You've mentioned before that we shouldn't see enforcement as punitive.
No, and that's a critical shift in thinking. It feels punitive to the owner who is receiving the order, of course. Nobody likes getting an improvement notice. But from the perspective of the public servant, enforcement is protective.
Protective of whom?
It protects the neighbors from the blight and the antisocial behavior that these properties attract.
Yeah.
A derelict house can ruin a whole street. It lowers property values. It attracts crime. It protects the housing supply. We have a shortage of homes, and we are protecting the resource for future generations. And it protects public investment. If a council is putting millions into regenerating a town center, they can't afford to have boarded up properties dragging the area down. So enforcement isn't about punishment, it's about protection.
That's a really helpful way to look at it. It takes the emotion out of it and puts it back into the realm of public duty. You're not attacking the owner, you're defending the community.
Exactly.
So we've covered the tools, we've covered the philosophy, but I want to look at how this is evolving. Because the best councils aren't just reacting to complaints anymore, are they? They aren't just waiting for the phone to ring.
No. The direction of travel is definitely towards strategic integration and prevention. The old model was reactive. Wait for a neighbor to complain about a rat in the garden, then send a letter. The new model is proactive.
What does that look like on the ground? How do you spot an empty home before it becomes a wreck?
It means earlier intervention. Instead of waiting for a property to be empty for 2 years before really focusing on it, effective authorities are tracking them from 6 months.
Catching them before the rot sets in.
Exactly. Before the damp takes hold, before the garden becomes a jungle, before the owner gets used to the idea of it being empty. Once a property has been empty for 5 years, the psychological hurdle to fixing it is huge. At 6 months, it's just a to-do list item.
And they're using data for this.
Much more intelligently, yes. They're using council tax data to spot trends, seeing where a property has become exempt or where the furniture has been removed. They can see when a probate process starts. It allows them to reach out and say, we see this property is now empty. Here is our menu of support before the problems even start.
And involving the community, too.
Yes, engaging communities to report concerns early. Reach out to residents, as the guidance says, because the earlier you catch an empty home, the easier it is to bring back.
And presumably, prevention reduces the burden on everyone.
Massive reduction. Prevention reduces the administrative burden, it reduces the cost of renovation, and it completely removes the need for that heavy enforcement we talked about. If you catch it at 6 months, a small loan might fix it. If you wait 10 years, you might have to CPO it. Prevention is just better economics.
So as we wrap up this discussion on delivery, it really feels like we're answering the challenge set by Empty Homes Week.
The challenge being, are we doing enough?
And I think the answer is that we certainly have a means to do enough. We aren't lacking the technology or the laws.
We aren't. We've seen that the tools exist. The powers are on the statute books. The incentives, like the loans in Kent, are proven to work. It's not a mystery how to solve this. It's a matter of applying the toolkit consistently and bravely.
Support where possible, enforcement where necessary.
That is the way forward.
Tomorrow, we are going to wrap up this entire series. We've looked at the problem, we've looked at the solutions, and we've looked at the tools. Tomorrow, we are going to zoom out to the widest possible lens. We're going to look at the future, how empty homes work can stop being a niche activity for a couple of officers in a basement and become a core pillar of our national housing and climate strategy.
I'm looking forward to that. It's about the bigger picture.
It certainly is. But for today, we'll leave it there because as we've learned, bringing homes back into use isn't accidental, it's intentional. And it leaves you with something to consider. If we know the right intervention can revive a single home, imagine what a fully intentional, well-resourced delivery system could do for entire communities currently left behind. Thanks for listening.